high performance, and high performance with a strong industrial democracy dimension, and high performance with strong unions is, in my view, essential for the future of New Zealand. You only have to watch the way this government treats unions, the way this government treats collective bargaining, this government treats industrial democracy and high performance to see the options that we have to choose between a strong, committed, involved, inclusive future, or one that really only suits the needs of a very small fraction of the population, and the rest can go hang. For those of us who heard Mr. Joyce today say, all we have to do to provide those miners as an extra job is to allow mining on the Denniston Plateau. There you have an extraordinary cynical view of what our future looks like under one scenario. Now, when I was asked to speak here, the year 1988 came to mind. And that was because that was the year I came here. I escaped Mrs. Thatcher. We'd lost the election in '87. I thought, actually what I thought I can't say because I'm too polite in public. I thought, sod it, I'm going to go. I applied for the first job I could. It was in Auckland. I came here and I got Roger Douglas. So the first thing I have to understand, don't take any strategic advice from me at all, clearly. But it was also the year I came and I met the PSA for the first time. Now, it wasn't on a picket line, it wasn't in an education process. It was in a quite different context. My first son was about to be born, and I went to an antenatal class with my partner and the WEA building on Williamson Avenue in Grey Lynn, some of you may know it. And there I met Joe Tonner and Marnie Ainsworth, who were in the same antenatal class. For those of you who don't know this history, that was a very particular introduction to the PSA, and one that has stayed with me since 1988. I have since known many other members of both staff and membership of the PSA, and have a much more pluralist view of the PSA since that time. But 1988 was important for me because there was another thing happened then. I'd arrived, and I'd been an employment relations specialist. I was trying to grapple with what was going on here. And there was a report published in 1988. It was a report on industrial democracy. Now this was a period when industrial democracy, as Richard alluded to, was an important issue. Not just here, but we were reflecting on 30 years of industrial democracy across Germany, across Holland, across the Scandinavian economies. Industrial democracy, workers' voice, was something we thought was important. So I thought, gosh, a report on industrial democracy in New Zealand, this could be something I could get involved in, really excited. And I started looking at the data from the survey. And it's the only report in my 35, 40 years in this job where 100% of the employers opposed industrial democracy. In that survey, not a single employer thought it was a good idea. And you have to actually say, I used to rock back on my heels, a bit like being hit by Richie McCaw on a really good tackle, you know? How can it be, in an OECD economy, an advanced economy, a sophisticated economy, the view of the employer class was that workers' voice, industrial democracy, was a bad thing? And I have for the last 22, 24 years been pondering on this because I fear, as I'll say in the course of the next few minutes, this is something that's continued. We have an extraordinary employer class to a large extent that doesn't understand the benefits of what Richard described earlier. The benefits not only for their own companies, but also for the economy and for the well-being of our communities and society. Now, I've looked at this for a long time, and I think there are some explanations here that we can use to explain why employers are unhappy with that notion. I'm not going to say a lot about the first issue, that's the impact of the award system. I know you came from a different tradition in the public sector, but I believe firmly that the award system was positive in many ways, stopped the development of workplace initiative, workplace activities, workplace collective bargaining that is essential for effective industrial democracy. By taking the debate and the negotiations up to the award level, we left an impoverished workplace. And I think that that's something that we've, from the union side, had to try and fill. Impoverished workplaces that don't have the collective experience of industrial democracy. We then had, of course, the Employment Contracts Act, which was designed precisely to stop workers' voice. It came in, of course, in a period of economic crisis, but the ECA was always ideologically about stopping employee voice in the workplace, except on the terms laid down by the employer. I still believe that the most damaging thing that 1990 government did, was the 1990 government did, was bring in the ECA, because it's had a fundamentally adverse effect on our performance as an economy, in terms of the performance of our workplaces and in terms of productivity and so on. You've then got a very poor quality of human resource management in New Zealand. Now, I'm partly to blame. I've taught them for 24 years, right? I mean, I fully accept, I bow down to you in a total apology for the awful human resource managers that some of you may have had to deal with. But that profession emerged in the 1990s. It didn't really exist prior to the ECA. Remember, we couldn't get enough seats in our classes when the ECA came along, because nobody had done workplace bargaining. Nobody had done bargaining at the level of the enterprise before. We had standing room in classes. But these were people who became HR managers under the ECA with all of that intellectual and ideological baggage. And we're still living with a generation of human resource managers who believe in the individual model, who don't have any experience of working with unions, who don't understand what the collective power of workforces can achieve in terms of the workplace and the broader economy. I try every year with my 30 middle-level HR managers, think differently. And they say, oh, I would like to, but our bosses don't want to. And I could say more about that, but we won't. Anyway, there are lots of arguments like that that explain why, in '88, and even now, employers, public sector, private sector, human resource managers, boards, find industrial democracy, ideas like workplace transformation, very difficult indeed. The root cause here, the root problem is industrial democracy challenges the authority of managers. Managers want to manage. They've got status, they've got a title, they've got an office. Why would you give up that status by handing over power or sharing power with the great unwashed in the workforce? I fought for my position as a manager. How dare these upstarts challenge this? I've got an MBA for crying out loud. What have they got? And we all know what the value of an MBA can be in the wrong hands. So anyway, I think there's a hypothesis that makes sense to me that the professionalisation of the HR function comes of age in New Zealand when collective bargaining, worker voice is being marginalised. And we live with that, the consequences of that today. We live in a period still where we have a powerful tradition of top-down managerialism, where there's little confidence in the employee voice. We have companies, organisations that work on the short term, 6-month cycles in the private sector, and how many organisations in the public sector are constantly under restructuring? You know, another CEO comes along, whoa, let's have another organisation, we'll chop it up in a different way. I've been working with the Department of Labour for the last 10 years on various things. I don't know how many restructurings the Department of Labour has had. I don't know if they know they're in Moby anymore. We're not allowed to say Moby, remember, because it keeps on bringing up Herman Melville and Dix. Mr. Joyce doesn't like that, so. Umby, we have to say, I'm told. MB? MB, sorry, forgive me. For those of you from MB, I apologise for taking the mickey out of Herman Melville. So I'm saying that New Zealand has shown itself, certainly in its management layer, in its management cadre, to be unreceptive to industrial democracy. We've tried to do something about this. There are valiant people, I'll come on to the PSO's role in this valiant behaviour in a minute. Valiant people have tried to sell the message of workplace engagement, of employee voice, of strong unions working with managers to the better effect of the workplace, the company and the economy. Owen Harvey, friends of mine like that, who since Workplace New Zealand have been quartering the country trying to sell this message. And it's a bit like the biblical story of seeds falling on infertile ground. The voice is there, the ideas are there, but the take-up of these ideas is not good in New Zealand. We talk a lot about it, actually. As I say, even managers will talk about it, but the doing seems to be rather difficult. And for a society that prides itself on its pragmatism, its can-do attitude, somehow, why we can't do in this area is really quite shocking. It's not as though we don't know what the benefits of high performance, of workplace transformation, of involvement are. There is chapter and verse on this. I don't want to go through the academic literature on this, but there are classic studies like the one by Black and Lynch, which I know that the PSA uses, that shows the best outcomes for a company are high union involvement, high union density, high employee engagement with a highly motivated management. The evidence is absolutely clear, because high union involvement in employee voice and organisation of work reduces transaction costs, reduces inefficiencies in the process, and of course releases your and my discretionary effort. Because that's always what we're teaching this. We're saying the key issue in work is why and how will people go that extra bit further? Why will they add that moment of creativity? Why will they do that extra hour of really deep, important work? Why will they be motivated? Well, partly because it's about ownership. This is something I want to do. It's my skill that I want to apply in an organisation I care for. But if you don't have the context to display those sorts of behaviours, you're not going to do it, and you start being the clock watcher. The person who goes through the process on a rote basis, doing the job, but with the excitement of watching, I don't know, the Black Caps play a 5-day test. Sorry, I'm a cricketer.
3 days.
I mean, Kane Williamson gets to be a number 3, but really of high quality, we might do better, that's another story. We have good examples of high performance. I've done case studies of Fonterra, I've done case studies of Richard Michael. You've got some very good examples in the public sector, where high performance has worked very well. You have opportunities, I know, in the public sector for high performance. It is not that it cannot be done here. It's not something about our DNA. It's not something about the water, the climate, the length of the island, the distance from Paris, or any other argument you might want to put in place. We can do it. We've shown ourselves able to do it. But, as I say, the ground is infertile. Meanwhile, out there in the rest of the world, they understand this. They understand the importance of high performance. The Finnish model, the Scandinavian model, the Singaporean model, the models of economies where their per capita GDP is shot ahead of New Zealand, are all, to some extent or other, based on 3 key things. Strong economic settings for growth. The debate we're following at the moment, the underpinning of all success, dealing with things like the exchange rate, which I won't go into today, but you need those macroeconomic underpinnings. You need strong collective bargaining. You need the legitimate autonomous voice of workers in organisations, with their own organisations, capable of making the noise, making the sounds, making the statements that are needed from that autonomous position. And you need the skills, the knowledge, the practices, the models of high performance that can be appropriate to your situation. What works in New Zealand will not necessarily be appropriate for Australia, won't be the same as what they do in Finland. All of these things are about homegrown initiatives that make sense. We know that's what we need to do. And I'm hoping, because I am a bit of a Pollyanna, that in 2014, government will change, and that a new government, led by whom, I'm not sure, but anyway, by Labour certainly, will actually stop talking about the stuff it talked about between 1999 and 2008, and start doing the work that it promised to do about collective bargaining, about stronger unions, and also about high performance work systems. And if I have anything to do with it, it will bloody well do it too. Anyway. Now that sounds like a lot of background, but what I'm trying to say to you is that this is difficult in New Zealand. We seem to find, you know, when you're climbing a hill, you get to a false summit, you think you're at the top. You go, oh yeah, there's another one. And another. It's a bit like that. You think you've got somewhere, then you find that there's another bloody great 300-metre pitch to go up. And that's how it seems to me. Is that we get a little step forward, and then the whole thing turns to custard. We've got to do better than that. So we've got that infertile context. Why is it so infertile? Well, there's lots of reasons I think we can adduce. I think you can see this in the public sector. You've got CEOs who don't want a bar of it. And if you don't have your CEOs and the management team behind this, you're never going anywhere with this. If they've got their own sense of status and importance so ingrained in them, they're not going to move on that. You know, at the present time, we've got no government support in the public sector for these things. Let's be honest, people like Mr. Ryle, Mr. Joyce, are not the great bastions of proletarian revolutionary struggle, are they? They're not going to actually set in motion a strengthening of collective bargaining and the growth of the PSA to ever greater levels. I'd like to see it. I would like to see it, but I suspect for them hell will freeze over several times before the PSA is strengthened by their hand. And as I've said, you face in the public sector constant turbulence. How can you have a long-term orientation towards high performance when next you never know firstly what organisation you're going to be working in tomorrow, or who you're going to be managed by, or indeed if you've even got a job. So those issues make that ground very infertile. You know, I could forgive the PSA if it just said sod it. We're going to give up the transformation of workplaces. We're going to go back to conflictual proletarian struggle. We're going to pick it and we're going to fight. We're going to go back to the old battered model of industrial relations, you know? Because you've been pushing this barrow for a long time in that infertile ground. And one of the great things that I want to say today is that PSA has been excellent on this. You have not given up this vital battle. It would have been so easy for your leaderships and for yourselves to say, we've had enough of this, but you've continued it. And you are doing not just a service to yourselves, but you're doing a service to the country by doing this. Because the stronger the voice from a big battalion like the PSA behind this, the more likely eventually the roots of this will take in New Zealand. And I can't stress how much respect I have for your leaderships and for you for taking this seriously across all the different sectors: health, local government, core public service and so on, taking it so seriously there. That sustained commitment is hugely important. And it's not just a sustained commitment. I was allowed to write a piece with Christine last year on sustainable work systems, which I took to a conference in Italy. That was very onerous, but there we are, you know, somebody was there. And it's the sophistication of the work that you've done in the PSA on this which is also important. And I will say that you are far ahead of most employer thinking on this. Most employers, if they understood the sorts of thinking that you are producing on this, would be, I think, gobsmacked. And you should be proud of that performance. Now, I also, as Richard has suggested, want to say that one of the things that you're saying louder than clearer than most organisations is that workplace transformation must happen if we want decent jobs, decent working conditions, decent pay, if we want our whole economy to perform better. And that's again that important bastion role you're playing in selling the message that it's about the whole range of issues: secure, safe workplaces, not just higher wages, that goes into the high performance message. Now, one of the essentials that you're arguing for, which I think must be mirrored elsewhere within the country, within our workplaces, within our sectors, within public and private sectors and so on, there are some essential requirements. First of all, you need strong, independent unions. I firmly believe we will not have that high performance future without a stronger union presence in New Zealand. Employers get really grumpy with me. I go and talk to their conferences occasionally and say, the problem with New Zealand is we don't have enough unions. Well, that doesn't go down terribly well. You look at the high performance economies that do succeed, and they all have strong, independent, legitimate employee voice. And that doesn't come from port-pro organisations like that's coming out of Ports of Auckland at the moment. It comes out of independent unions like the PSA. And I hope, as I say, when Labour comes back, they'll do more to guarantee the strength and depth of that independent union movement in the country, because it's vital for our economic performance. You need leadership in the organisation. I'm not talking about traditional it's leadership in the organisation. People in the organisations that you work in. Leadership at the level of delegates. Leadership at the people on the shop floor who understand this better than their employers, as I say. It's about permeating the organisation with the sense that this is not just a nice thing to do, it's an essential thing to do, not only for your own circumstances, but for the national circumstances generally. That means you need champions. One of the things that the Fonterra case study of the dairy workers and the engineers showed you, that having champions in the organisation all the way through, who understand the complexities of the process, know the stuff, and take the stuff forward is very, very important. Role models are important too, but I think the fundamental dimension for a strong independent union is membership ownership of this. Now, no membership is going to universally accept these ideas. You've got, I think, 58,000 people. I'd be very surprised if 58,000 of you were all as one on this model of high performance. Some of you will have been bitten by the notion of productivity, right? Some of you will have had bad experiences and will think, oh, I'm not sure if I want to get myself stuck in that sort of process again. I understand that. But I say to you that without high performance, nothing much will happen to our economy other than a downwards slide generally. And I suspect your own workplaces will suffer because of that. So I'm saying to the people who are committed, remain committed. And for those of you who are questioning, and so you should, engage in the debate. Make the PSA one of those organisations that lives the message, warts and all, because that will be what impresses eventually the employer. Not just being told from on high, but the message coming out from the rank and file across the organisation. A second thing unions need to do is have strong organisational and design capacities. We need to be able to say what high performance looks like in our organisations in terms of the design and schemes, right? That's absolutely vital. It's a technical capacity. The PSA has it, many unions don't in New Zealand, and there's some way about where you need to actually extend that design capacity around high performance across the union movement. We need to look at examples of success nationally and internationally. Look at the demonstration effect of where it works and why. We need to get management buy-in. The problem we have, of course, in this is that managers are the first movers in this process. We don't make the first decision. The people in the top office do. So we have to make sure that they understand the benefits that come from this process. And that buy-in has to be to all sorts of things. It has to be a buy-in to collective bargaining, a buy-in to union presence and voice, a buy-in to union involvement in the design of high performance, a buy-in to the costs. High performance is expensive. You have to invest in it. It doesn't happen without large-scale expenditures on the whole. But you particularly have to have managers that buy into shared power. Managers that understand that high performance means their power will have to be qualified. This funny story I know is of Fonterra managers who had a 10% increase in productivity in the Hawea plant in Taranaki through high performance. When I interviewed them, they said, oh, it wasn't about high performance systems, it was about our information technology systems. That 10% improvement of performance was because we got better computers. And when I said, well, not even your CEO believes that, that your CEO understands its high performance behaviours that you put in practice, empowering the dairy workers and the engineers, of course, their management team said, no, they're wrong. They could not admit that giving power to their workforces was important, because they were challenged. I think we also need a supportive government. Roll on 2014. The three Davids singing their tenor-like voices. Or at least two of them. We'll see what happens, I don't know. But I think above all, and I want to really finish on this, this is a hard road to hoe. And for the union, there have to be outcomes that suit the members. We know what the outcomes for the employer are in high performance: better productivity, better delivery of services. That's why they'll sign up for this. But there has to be a quid pro quo. You won't go there unless that quid pro quo is met. That's not just money. Money's good. But it isn't just about higher wages. It's about better work. More enjoyable work. Work that you want to do, that releases the talents that are in you. Work that allows you to express yourself, dare I say, in terms of your creativity, of your capacity to think as human beings, not as automatons, in some sort of simple wage relationship with the employer. Unless you have that full range of satisfactions from high performance, the sorts of challenges that you will raise amongst members, will still sit there. So of course you challenge, because you need to have that whole array of outcomes that suit you, that are required by you from high-performance systems. If you get that, just imagine if every workplace in New Zealand had those sorts of arrangements, where a strong unionised workforce owning what was going on in the workplace, with a management that understood that that ownership had positive some outcomes. Just think where New Zealand would be as an economy. Just think where you'd be in terms of your capacities in your workplace. Now, isn't that a damn exciting prospect compared with the current downward spiral? And just think, you're at the vanguard of that process. Congratulations.